not saying that the Black family is fundamentally queer. That might be a bit of a radical statement, but I'm leaning in towards it.
Okay. I lean in with
I'll
you.
lean in. Yeah, I'll lean in with you.
I lean with you. Yeah. Powerful thing, We're not supposed to be a family, right? We're supposed to be dispersed, and we're supposed to be subjects of the state. So Black family, radical family love to me is fundamentally queer in terms of the context, so.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 4th season of In the Telling, a global Black family podcast. I'm Miranda, and I am joined by my fabulous co-host, Stephen G. Fullwood.
Hi.
And we are the founders of the Nomadic Archivist Project.
We're also excited to announce that we are currently accepting applications for the NAP Scholarship. The NAP Scholarship is an annual fund awarded to students, early career, and independent archivists of African descent. For more information, please visit our website at nomadicarchivistproject.com.
So on this season of In the Telling, we are speaking with Black, trans, and gender nonconforming folks nationally and internationally about their family stories, biological or chosen.
Today's guest is Ayan Felix, sometimes just Felix, who lives and performs in North Carolina as a movement artist, environmental justice advocate, and multi-disciplinary collaborator. Born to the swamps of Beaumont, Texas, they moved to Durham for the Duke Dance MFA program, completed in 2021. The land heavily informs our artistic practice, which takes root in collaborative process with other cultural organizers, body workers, agitators, I love that, and spirits. Their research examines pleasurable terror. Ooh, we got to get into that. And Black American markers of social class with a focus on burlesque and cabaret performances. Felix was an NCDF artist in residence and makes screen dance and performances in North Carolina, Texas, and New York. Learn more at movingaf.com.
Hello. Thank
Hello,
you.
welcome
to In the Telling, Ayan. How are you feeling today?
I'm great. It's the beginning of the year. I feel sort of the energies coming together, and they're still going to be coming until probably the Lunar New Year. So there's a lot of flow in my life right now. Luckily, I'm had a longer break this year. So this is a great time for me to dig into these stories.
Okay. All right, great. Yeah. Having positive flow is extremely important, especially right now.
Critical.
Especially right now. So I'll start with the first question for you, Ayan. This is sort of just a way to sort of like ground the conversation and for us to get to know you a little bit better. So if you could just take a moment to identify yourself for us and listeners, just talk a little bit about who you are, where you grew up, anything you'd like to share.
Yes. I'll say my name again, Ayan Felix. I prefer they, them pronouns. Honestly, if I was in Black spaces, it's any pronoun. It's whatever comes out in love.
Okay.
I currently reside in North Carolina. I'm thinking about moving.
Okay.
That's what that pause was. Reside in North Carolina. My heart lies in many different places, also in many different times and with many different people. My partner and I have been thinking a lot about what it would be if we went back to Texas, where I'm from. And yeah, I'm from a little city called Beaumont. It's swampland, it's rice paddy land. It's sometimes people's like gas station. That's the only reason people know it. And
okay.
Other people know it because of the energy.
How large is it?
Population, I think, is currently like somewhere between 100 and 200,000. So
okay. So it's not too bad. It's not too small.
No. It's not too small. And it has like I-10 runs through it, which is a major highway. So most times people are like, yeah, that's the stop before you get to the casinos in Lake Charles.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that's where I'm from. It's an energy town, gas and oil heavy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of cultures flow through it.
Mm-hmm.
And it wonderfully has its own sort of Creole Texan culture that has been
Oh, okay.
born. So that's what I was raised within. Um, at least physically. Within my family, there's a lot of different overlines, which we can get into later. There's a lot of big intersections in my family of Black history. I think
Mm-hmm.
that I feel honored to be within, and has inspired me to become an artist. I mostly work in the medium of movement, any kinds and all kinds of movement. I am wonderfully sometimes a dance nerd, sometimes I'm a dance tussler, sometimes I'm so against the institution of dance, but I just love it. I feel all the big feelings for it.
Okay.
And that's allowed me to work across disciplines. I should give a moment to at least name some of maybe the peoples of the lands as well.
Okay.
So I grew up with knowing that Creole meant a lot of things, and also that is like a subtle way to ignore the native history in the area, because everyone's blended, so you don't have to worry about, it's like everyone's here, don't worry about it.
Okay.
And I took, I think, little moments throughout my life, and particularly, after 2021, to dig back into who those people are. So from my knowledge, Karankawa people were coastal people that moved between, honestly, I think all the way down to what's now Corpus over to Alabama. And there's also some influence of the Coushatta Indians who were forced into that land. So that's there. Here, there's the Okanichi band of the Pony people, as well as the Eno, and the Catawba people that have been informing, it's particularly as I started to really want to tap into whatever land-based practice is, really been helping me start the conversation on how I identify with the land and what it is to perform outside, and how I want to interact with people.
Right.
I love this because it's one of the first times I've heard of a land acknowledgement that was rooted in a practice. It wasn't just said at the top of an event, and it didn't seem to have any connection to the event itself. So I appreciate you starting out with that. I'm also interested in your family. We had mentioned in our pre-interview that, your family has a lot to do with who you are and how you're developing. And so can you talk a little bit about how your family informs your queerness and your thoughts about yourself?
Certainly. I love starting, at least artistically, whenever I'm in a collaborative space, I love starting with the story of sort of the big events I grew up in, because so much of my time is spent in nightlife right now. It's like there wasn't a moment in my life where I didn't have a nightlife, which is odd to think about, I think, in maybe like a Black American context of like, what do you do after dark? Well, you're in the house probably. And there's so many family events that actually informed the way I relate to nightlife now, which is a large part of my performance practice and my queer identity. We started in Zydecos, and
I love Zydecos.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I love Zydecos. It's an all-encompassing space for me. And starting like from the daytime in the early mornings of like, I wasn't present for the trail ride because my family wasn't necessarily waking up for that and starting the trek, but starting in the early morning trail rides and ending somewhere, even in sort of like Black Texan cowboy culture of like ending somewhere and stewing something up. It's not necessarily called a Zydeco, but as soon as you get the band there and you get the music flowing, that I think helped as a child inform like how I structure my ability to relate to people, and my ability to connect, and my ability to connect is like is a part of my queerness. So going from that aspect of everyone's at the Zydeco, even the people you don't want to be at the Zydeco.
Oh, okay.
And it's a celebration of like, you know, it's almost sometimes like a way of pageantry. If, you know, people are showing up after sort of all the dirty trail rides in their best, right? Like they, you know, and, you know, the band's there, the amount of physicality broke a lot of, I think, the things that I was learning maybe in school or in church or in, even in my own family, right? They would say one thing and then you get to the Zydeco and men are dancing with men, women are dancing with women. It's intergenerational. It's sort of all these things. And I think that as a fluid space, really looking back on it, and I think this happens to a lot of people when they're, I don't know, in their baby gay mode or they're sort of like coming out mode of like, man, there were all those times when I was younger where I had these thoughts. Or, I mean, I don't know if that ever stops happening because it still happens to me. Like, it's the moment where you're like, oh, like, I think actually what was being orally taught to me and passed down to me in words or however, like, is not accurate to the way people were living their lives. And being able to accept that and continue accepting it, I think is what really is the bedrock of how I've felt stable and strong in my queer identity and being non-binary and being able to say that, yes, at one point, like, I was attracted to women. And then before that, I think I was attracted to girls. And then before that, I didn't care who, like, you know, being able to like trace back the understanding of attraction that's not just, you know, sexual, that is about finding your kindred folks and your family throughout time.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, you're right. It's like about like how people present, you know, it's the stories that we tell. And then we think, oh, this is reality. This is the truth. But then when you get into a space and you can actually see what's happening, you're like, oh, this is not the story. This is not actually what's happening, you know, but, you know, to be in a polite situation or society, you're like, okay, this is it, but it's not, you know, these are just things that, you know, we just kind of pass down for some reason. To smooth over the bumps, I guess.
Certainly. And this is also to say that my family is actually pretty conservative aligned in terms of like, they weren't the people necessarily getting down. They weren't necessarily there for, you know, the mess.
Right.
But the idea that we're still present in the space together, I think should be something that's uplifted. Particularly as we go into moments of right now where it's like, what is solidarity in this time of like, sometimes it is showing up.
Right. I mean, you zoom out and it looks, you know, you can see it and everything. You see that sort of solidarity, but when you zoom in, you can see all the different things that are going on and the way that people are responding to things and existing together, you know, regardless. So it's kind of nice. So thank you for sharing that. Before we talked, you were interested in talking with us about the story of your two fathers, which is very fascinating. And I'd love to hear more about, you know, having two fathers in your life and their different backgrounds, I think are also what makes the situation very complex and interesting, and how you sort of navigated, you know, them in your life.
Yeah. Presidents, navigating.
Navigating
them in my life. Yeah. Yeah. Whew. I learned I had another dad in 2018.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's fairly recent. I didn't grow up. So
does this mean three fathers?
No.
These are the two.
Yeah, these are the two. Yes.
Okay.
I grew up with one father who is my daddy. That's, you know, love him down. And then, in 2018, my mom was like, look, you got another last name. And I was like, it wasn't actually my mother, but that's a whole like 23andMe scandal.
Got it.
that came together. I know exactly. The results are in.
Okay.
Yeah. And
were you expecting to get those results before you got them?
Oh, certainly not.
Was it something you were searching for? Okay, so this was actually a real big surprise to you.
A huge surprise. And
okay.
Honestly, it's still surprising, right? Like, this is part of the like relating and the figuring it out of I am thankful, like deeply thankful. I think, I mean, even if I didn't get those results, like I think I still would have been interested in that sort of like genetic analysis of what of my DNA and my ethnicity and things like that. But yeah, this was a huge surprise. And my mom was like, "Yeah, I knew you were gonna figure it out." And so that's a whole conversation.
Okay.
That's a whole conversation with like spirit too, right? Of like, you know, what are we telling ourselves? So yeah, I found out it took about 2 or 3 years for the connection to really settle in between me and my bio dad, who's like now my pop, right? And like, yeah, figuring out this relationship between, okay, I got a dad, I got a pop, has been like a low lying vibration, I think, in my 20s.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, I am the person who just kind of met it head on of like, okay, there were some adult decisions made, right? There are some adult decisions made when I wasn't even considered, right? Like in terms of like as a person. And then as I grew into my adulthood, I think I was like able to better understand, and particularly because it happened in my like late 20s, I was able to understand like, okay, like some of this is not mine. Some of this is someone else's.
Right.
And now I get to actually have this relationship with a new person. Yeah, so that's how I approached it. That's definitely not how, I think that's a deeply personal thing for me is, it's not how, you know, my mom and my dad understood the situation. It's not how my siblings, because I do have 3 siblings from their marriage. And that's not how my siblings understood it. And now my siblings are starting to understand of like, oh man, you have a lot more family that we get to know now too, which is beautiful.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a nice response.
Exactly.
Yeah. More the merrier.
Exactly.
Adulting, clarifying relationships.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think knowing that, them knowing that I was queer has definitely informed that too, because I've already brought people into the family, right? I'm like, this is my friend, you're going to love them alongside me.
That part.
Yeah. So I think that helped sort of like them understand what was going on. And there's so much more history that's not in our family. I probably should have said this during the introduction as well, of like, I mean, I come from a welcoming family in general. And on both sides, my mom's side, who's sort of the physical family who was around us, the Louisiana, Texas family and Alabama family. And then also my dad's side, who are the people from the islands who, I mean, they moved to New York and they're totally still open and welcome, which allowed me to then sort of meet this as I am. Yeah, so that's the brief of it. My pops people come from, or like Texan, pretty much, as far as I understand, like 5 generations back. Like solidly like Black Texas family, mostly from a tiny town that's southwest of Beaumont called Stowell, but also Winnie. And
so not too far where you grew up.
No. And that's the the story is they were, my mom and my pop were co-workers, and then yes, exactly, that's where the mess started in the workplace, as it often happens. Yeah. So yeah, not too far. And I actually feel learning about his family seems almost easier, because I think learning about my dad's family was a whole like, are we going to go to the islands and get these stories? Are we going to, are they in New York? Are there more stories in other places? And so I do have a bit of a closer connection at least physically, with these people, of being able to meet and connect. Yeah.
So what happened once you found, it sounds like you found out the results, you spoke with your mother, and it came out. How did you then find your father, or what do you call him again? Pop? Pop. How did you reach out to him? How did that connection happen?
Yeah. Yeah, because his records weren't on 23andMe. So like it sort of came out that like my siblings were my half siblings, which it's hard for me to say now, because even in my mom's family, we don't do half siblings. Like it's like
Black don't do that in general. Black folks don't do that. That's not how I grew up. You just go, that's my sister, that's my brother.
That's my brother.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes it's like, oh yeah, that's their dad, or like that's their grandma or something. But
right.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, my siblings came out as like, genetically we did not have the same DNA. So my mom was like, your dad, it's, Virgil, you've known him kind of like in and out your entire life. So we did have a sort of distance relationship.
Okay.
So that was, at least knowing who he was an easy thing.
Because they continued to work together?
Yeah.
There were
so you knew him as like a family friend, or
yes. Okay. And like my mom's job used to do these like huge holiday parties, so it was sort of a thing where it's like his family was at the holiday party, we were at the holiday party.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did he know this whole time?
Yes.
Okay.
Certainly. Yes. He knew, my mom knew, my dad did not know. So that was another thing. Yes. That was another thing.
Okay.
So that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's hard too, because you both basically found out. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, together. And that's sort of the thing about our relationship that I love to sit with for a bit, because I mean, me and my dad, like, I mean, at least in our adulthoods, like, have been like buddies, right? So like that's my friend in a certain sense. So when this all came out, it was like, you gonna do my man like that? Like,
yeah,
it was sort of that feeling of like, I'm gonna have to sit with this and like kind of change this relationship that I've had with my mother to sort of like fit within this, and also like like that's my dog. Like it's all right, because we're still here, and I'm happy I was born. But yeah, it was I think also like a certain turning point within like our dynamic.
Okay.
As just like our chunk of the family, because my siblings were just kind of like, yes, whatever. A little bit. They were upset, right? They were upset. They were like, we made all those like your adopted jokes when you were younger, because I'm the baby of the family, right? And I just came trailing along.
Oh, okay.
So they're like, we're sorry we made all those jokes, but like we love you no matter what. But yeah, it's definitely like the sitting with the like, how you gonna lie on us like that, man? Like sitting with that for probably like, I mean, it was like 3 years where we were just kind of like, we don't trust you, lady. And then
that's reparative work.
Yeah. A lot. And now my parents are retired. So like, I'm glad that this sort of happened when they were still in their working years, because they were able to like gather it all. And be like, oh, okay, this is going to have to happen. And now that we're retired, everyone's a little bit more relaxing into it and being like, this is just the reality. And even this past holiday season, like in December 2024, we were able to sit down and like celebrate together. And then I was able to like leave and go celebrate with my pop's family for a little bit. Beautiful. Yeah. And I like was able to meet some of my like brothers for the first time. So that was wonderful.
And how so tell us about Virgil, right? His family do you feel like, because it's so close in terms of proximity, that like culturally and I don't know, like, is it similar to how you grew up? It's a totally different Texas family experience.
Yeah, it feels similar. I will say that because my mom was born in Opelousas, Louisiana, in the 60s.
Okay.
And in the early 60s. And so her culture that we had growing up was a lot more Louisiana, in a certain sense in Texas, but some people even think that Beaumont's a part of Louisiana anyways. So there's that. And so for his family, I think culturally, being a little bit more Texan and sort of having a little bit more of a stationary feel. Like these people have been here for 5 generations. Like they've celebrated Juneteenth since it started, right? Like that sort of thing of like bringing that history and heritage forth. Still feel similar. And I'm starting to learn a little bit more of a pride about my Texanness that I didn't have before.
Okay. Oh, so that's interesting too. So then,
yeah.
Family,
and they still celebrate,
identity.
We still make the same banana pudding. We still kind of cook our collard similarly. Like there's things that are definitely still familiar. And they're luckily like also welcoming, which I feel so blessed to like just be around people who are like, we got another like sibling. Come on. Like I'm
more merrier. Come on.
Yeah. So I'm thankful.
I love that because as you talk through your family, how you guys kind of found each other, how you found Pops, and the melding of the families. This is really powerful. I'm curious about how the family tea, how these stories have shaped you as an artist, as a person, how they've kind of maybe affected you in ways you hadn't really thought about, maybe in some cases, or they've sort of built you up as an artist. You're like, okay, you seem to be a very open and thoughtful, engaging person. So this it's funny because calling it family tea isn't really what I want to say, but it's sort of like these stories, these narratives,
I guess if I had to clarify, I don't have. I guess this is influencing sort of all the relationships I make, and I think it actually does have maybe the least influence on sort of the artistic collaborations that I've started to come into in the past maybe like 5 years as I've been in North Carolina. And yeah, I am definitely an open person. So when this was happening and the people who were around me, even like, like my dance friends were being like, man, that's crazy. Like, like, okay, like, let's take a moment to sit with this. Let's go to Taco Tuesday and talk about this or whatever, and figure things out. I think I don't know necessarily the way they've influenced my like strictly artistic relationships in a sense. I know I definitely bring it with me because I have to. I think I don't want to say forcing. It's a little bit of forcing, like forcing people to accept me. Like this is gonna be what it is. Like this is the artwork I have to put out. This is the thing that I'm sharing of myself. And being able to lead with that energy is, I think, deeply informed by this situation. I know that there's a lot more stories within my family, like from either direction. And like this is because I think because this story is so impactful because it has to do with trust and being able to be like, I'm, sort of a sacred connection of like parent and child that I grew up with is like fundamentally changed. And from my understanding, like from whatever like my understanding of like psychology, like family psychology is like being able to shift that is a part of who I am because I have accepted that, queerness is this broad thing. It's not just like sexual relationships. It's not just like physical orientation. It's a bit of, right? Like not saying that the Black family is fundamentally queer. That might be a bit of a radical statement, but I'm leaning in towards it.
Okay.
I lean in with you.
I'll lean in with you.
I lean with you. Yeah. Powerful thing, you know. We're not supposed to be a family, right? We're supposed to be dispersed, and we're supposed to be subjects of the state. So Black family, radical family love to me is fundamentally queer in terms of the context, you know, so.
Right.
Yeah.
And, Ayan, as you were talking about, like, just how much your family and then your pop's family sort of accepted you or, welcomed you. I mean, I find that that's, it's probably not true across the board, but I know it's true in my family and other people that I've talked to. There's always, you go to a family function and there's a new family member.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe they were somebody who you've known all the time, like down the block.
Mm-hmm.
But, and then you're just like, cool, this is great.
Yeah.
Good to meet you.
Again?
Like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's never a shut. No, it's always like, let us come in and let us tell you. You talk about stories. Let us tell you our stories. Let us tell you who is who,
Mm-hmm.
how everybody relates to each other. And, there's a real sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And just a real sense of like, now you belong. If we know you, even if you're not blood really, but you belong to us now. You are a part of us and we welcome you. And I feel like that is, so yes, I mean, when you talk about like radical queerness and all of that, it just feels like that's exactly right when talking about race.
Yeah.
Although it's not conclusive across the board.
And it doesn't mean there isn't conflict.
But there is a theme.
No, there will still be conflict. Don't worry.
There's
been competition.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I've had that my entire life, even from my like grandfather's family. That was a thing. I think when my brother was in high school, I think I was in like elementary school or something like that. My brother was like, I think they're related to us. And it was like someone in his classroom, right? Like, or like a teacher or something like that. And everyone was just kind of like, probably. Probably. They were related. We found it out. We figured it out. They were.
Oh, okay.
they were first cousin that we didn't know yet. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they're really related. Did you either do oral histories of family members, or do you use oral histories that I don't know, that you've learned or that other people have passed down through your practice?
I do. Not so explicitly. For me, the fascinating thing is to hear a story and then move to it, or hear a story and then sort of build a narrative around it that can then like score a piece or score a longer work. So yeah, and I think because I might be like I'm not a cultural preservationist. I'm not necessarily. I don't label myself as a historian. I definitely am a agitator. For me, it all becomes sort of like the network it's within the network of like citation that I have, and that I've always had, at least with my solo work, of being able to say, like, start with maybe an understanding of dipping into like the terror part of it. An understanding of what terror has been from my family and what pleasures then they've found in it, or what things that they've, another way to say that is what things they've just accepted of it and have actually flipped and made pleasurable. And taking that taking those stories and helping it sort of build my strength as I approach maybe another kind of terror for me. I can be more specific than that. Like the story that my mother grew up with and lived through around election season was like, there's always going to be more stories of Black death, lynchings, things that were either state or interpersonal, but usually like state driven, of like, oh, and the cops never looked into it, or this is just something that happened and we don't know actually what happened, this is just who was affected. And having these stories of terror pushed into the neighborhood and also happening, right? Like there's sort of a legends. They become legends in a way because it's like we don't actually know if this happened in this way, but we do know that this person is no longer here.
Right.
Or we know that this person had to move away. So there's sort of those things that were happening that were obviously voter suppression around election season that my mother then was like, well, that just gives me more reason to go to the polls and vote for who I'm going to vote for. That just gives me more reason to continue this. And I mean, my grandma grew up with poll tax. And so, you know, and it's like being able to turn around and say like, well, I'm going to find that money. I'm going to, and this is actually going to empower me and be maybe not enjoyable in the way I understand, but something that lifts me up as a person to continue living my truth. And so for me, I'm really interested in sort of this subtle shift into and flipping the narrative around for themselves, like interpersonally. And that's what helped me get through this last voting season.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the things that helped me get through the last voting season. And personally, and it's not necessarily a narrative that I push on other people. I don't necessarily ascribe to electoral politics in the same way as my mother and my grandmother, but having that be something that is oral history that helps me reorient politically. As I was moving through the election season, like physically, like doing gigs and doing work, being able to say, like, I actually have to take a moment to say what I need to say because these things have happened. Because, you know, my mom sort of lived through a scarier version of a more viscerally scarier version of what I'm currently living through. Right. So, being able to take that and be like, what was my mom's physicality when she was walking to the polls? How was she walking? How was my grandma stepping? How was my grandma driving? What was like all of sort of like the physical remnants of that and taking that with me into my choreographies is something that I think is really important. And the ways that it sort of turns into this like artistic something else.
That's beautiful, thinking through the physicality of it, because we talk about voter suppression, but we think, you know, that means that they won't let you into the polls, or you have to stand this way, no water while you're standing in line, and all these different things that are there to really prevent you from exercising your right to vote. And the understanding or thinking about and considering the physicality of what it means ancestrally, you know, through your bloodline is really a powerful way of making it real to someone else, right? And expressing it. And so that for me is really powerful and it's useful, right? I think it's good in healing for the body, because that's another thing about the U.S. to me is that it's the United States of amnesia. You're not supposed to remember anything. You're supposed to just be a compliant consumer, right? And blindly follow. So you're not supposed to have a memory. Yep. And so doing that, that's really, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for doing that kind of work. I'm going to pivot slightly to the right with the word queer. Use of queer as a very broad and inclusive term for those othered by society. And so for a lot of folks over the last 30 to 40 years, they've been reclaiming terms, faggot, queer, nigger, all these terms and stuff. How do you think about the reclamation of the word queer in your own practice, in your family?
Certainly. Well, I have to start with bell hooks. I have to start with Pat Parker. I have to start with yes, come on. Feel like for me a H-Town hero, but she doesn't get enough props. At least in Houston, you know. But yeah, I have to start with them because looking into their words and their poetries and the way that they move throughout their artistic practice. And particularly like Bell Hooks, you know, talks about it and like talks directly like we can't keep looking at this as something and that no from her is my no as well.
Nice.
And taking that on of like if we keep opposing these limitations to like these conceptual limitations and these boxes into the way we even just think about how we build families, how we even think about building relationships, building friendships, it's detrimental. It's like something that, right, that's a conservatism I think that my family was trying to teach me, but didn't really stick. It's that thing that they were trying to be like, yeah, this is the way you're going to get friends. You just get friends at work. You get friends from extracurricular activities, you know, like you get friends from school and those are the only friends you can have, sort of thing. Like don't meet friends in the club. Those are dangerous people. That sort of thing. I think
those people go to work actually.
Hello.
And extracurricular.
And sometimes the club is their work. So yeah, it's that that rejection, which almost feels like, at least in like the theory of it, like it's like it's a counter to the original rejection, right? Like it's originally like, we don't want you here, and it's like, actually, I don't want to be here. How about that?
Yeah.
And like how does me allowing, like my saying no and I actually don't want this, or no, I would love to be able to say that I have two dads and not have it be like taboo. How do these things allow us to then live healthier lives, like on the whole, like spiritually and culturally and socially? So yeah, I think being able to lean into the art of it all is where my queerness really took off. But yeah, as I stated earlier, I've always been, you know what I'm saying, like a little sugar. I'm sorry for the people who are listening. I'm doing the broken wrist. The broken wrist gesture. Yeah.
Limp wrist, yes.
Yeah, limp wrist. Yeah, exactly. I've always been a little like that. So a little different, a little tomboyish, a little, you know, rough in a certain sense. And I've always wanted to be like that, and not even thought about being like that in a certain sense. So it's unconscious and conscious, and being able to recognize that as an adult has helped me been like, oh, like this is another aspect of it. Like not only do I come from, like, I mean, as many do, like a family that's not conventional, I'm also able to overlap that with all the other layers of who I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, anything that you want to leave us with here today? We covered a lot. We covered a lot in terms of just breaking down some local Texas history, your story, obviously finding out about your biological father, and just the pops. And, you know, just this idea that you brought up a lot, actually, throughout this talk about the stories we tell ourselves versus the stories we tell others versus the reality, whatever that reality is. But anything that you want to end with?
I would definitely love to just bring in like my chosen family, like the people who have sat with me through all of this. I have some really good friends who just are willing to be my siblings and willing to be my aunties as well, my uncles as well, at the same time. That helped me, one, come to terms with all the truths that were present, and then also share the story publicly and be like, hello. And even my brother before this, like my biological brother, was like, go ahead, say it. What's the worst that can happen? And I was like, actually, what's the best that can happen? Because there's so many good things. I think there's so many good things about, I think there's so many good things about the story, sitting with the messiness of our family stories that become apparent, one, when you start digging into like the genealogy of it, of like, oh, this person has a different last name than I expected. Or this, you know, the funeral program doesn't line up with what I know of this person. That sort of thing. I think being able to sit with that is a beautiful thing. And it's something that shouldn't go underappreciated at all. It's like the first steps for a lot of maybe more like straight people, which I don't know if I can't speak for them, but I think it's a lot of steps that queer folks who I can speak directly to aren't able to take in a certain way because they understand their queerness as separate from all of everything else, right? It's like a thing like, oh, you have that gay cousin, or oh, you have that. And it's being able to sit with like, yeah, maybe I am the gay cousin, and like there are all these stories that are within my family and within my chosen families that I'm able to bring together. And yeah, it shouldn't go underappreciated. Like you have to like appreciate your queer family members because they're holding, I think we hold so much of like I'm the tie between 3 families right now and all of some of my friends' families as well. So it's like being able to share those stories and keep it going.
Yeah, you're kind of revealing those connections regardless. Like they're not separate. You're all of these things through you, but also through those families. And so I love the fact that we're not separate. We've never been separate. But what you said, we understand ourselves sometimes as separate based on how we're being described, socially. But it's like, no, we're actually moving that apart. That's not the truth of the matter.
Yeah, and sometimes we do have to separate ourselves. I will say that.
Okay.
But that also means that doesn't mean you can't keep the stories. That doesn't mean you can't keep your heritage alive. There's certain family members that I don't talk to as much as I would like to, but I also still know their childhood, or I've heard about their childhood from someone else, or I've been able to, sort of glean information that helps me create a more complete story of what my family history is. And yeah, sharing those stories with your friends is honestly some of the best parts about and your chosen family, about the best parts about sort of being in conflict, of being like, you can't believe what happened to my grandma's cousin, like that sort of thing. Yeah, I definitely want to lean into particularly in times like these where we are reconfiguring how to be as a state, to lean into sharing stories outside of your family and being able to be honest and share the truths outside of your family, outside of your, like whatever you think of as your blood family or your immediate family.
Yeah. We really appreciate you being here with us today and being so open with us and sharing these stories with us.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. It has been really wonderful to be in conversation with you today.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you all. I'm very excited. I was a little nervous actually coming on because I was like, I am not a genealogist. I sometimes don't even have the words for the cousins that I know. Like,
I'm glad you came on.
Yes, I'm very thankful for being here, and I'm thankful for you, Miranda and Steven, to just be able to open the space to talk about this is beautiful and needed. And I welcome all this energy, and I hope you continue doing it.